The dim hum of the station's life support filled the observation deck like a distant heartbeat. Captain Alara Voss leaned against the viewport, her fingers tracing the cold edge of the reinforced glass. Stars stretched out before her, pinpricks of light in the void, but today they seemed sharper, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. She was a woman of calculated risks, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, her uniform crisp despite the weeks of isolation. At 42, Alara had seen her share of anomalies, solar flares, rogue asteroids, but nothing like the reports filtering in from the outer colonies. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren adjusted his glasses, squinting at the holographic display flickering between them. Kai was the cautious one, always double-checking data before uttering a word, his lab coat rumpled from endless nights in the research bay. "The readings don't lie, Captain," he said, his voice steady but laced with unease. "Quantum fluctuations across Sector 7. It's like the fabric of space-time is fraying at the edges." Alara nodded, not taking her eyes off the stars. Her crew was small, just her, Kai, and engineer Mira Torres down in the engine room. Mira was the spark of the group, witty and quick with a tool, her laughter a rare sound that cut through the station's sterility. 3 humans, adrift on Outpost Epsilon, a forgotten relay point on the galaxy's fringe. They'd been here for months, monitoring trade routes that no longer bustled with ships. The war with the Krell had quieted, but the silence felt heavier now. A soft chime interrupted them. Alara straightened, activating her comm Torres report. Myra's voice crackled through, laced with her usual sarcasm. "Engines are purring like a contented cat, Cap. But I've got weird feedback in the graph plates. Feels like the station's itching to shift." "Copy that. Keep an eye on it." Alara cut the line and turned to Kai. "Fraying how exactly? Give me the short version, no jargon." Kai hesitated, pushing his glasses up. He pulled up a simulation on the holo, a web of glowing lines representing spacetime with dark threads unraveling at the periphery. "Imagine the universe as a tapestry. Something's pulling threads loose. If it spreads, entire systems could collapse. Black holes forming spontaneously. We've lost contact with 3 outposts in the last 48 hours. The word hung in the air. Collapse. Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the recycled air. She'd piloted through nebulae storms and negotiated with alien envoys, but this was the kind of threat that didn't announce itself with blaring alarms. It whispered, insidious. Down in the engine room, Mira wiped grease from her hands on her jumpsuit, her dark curls escaping her ponytail. She was 28, the youngest by far, but her hands moved with the precision of someone twice her age. The station's core thrummed beneath her feet, a fusion reactor jury-rigged from salvaged parts. She liked the rhythm of it, the way she could coax life from metal and code. But lately the vibrations felt off, subtle tremors that made the bulkheads groan. Her console beeped, pulling her from her thoughts. Sensor data streamed in, anomalous energy spikes, mirroring the ones Kai had been muttering about. Mira frowned, cross-referencing with the station's logs. "Come on, you stubborn beast," she murmured, rerouting power to stabilize the shields. A plan formed in her mind: boost the inertial dampeners, maybe rig a feedback loop to counter the fluctuations. Simple human ingenuity at work. But as she initiated the sequence, the lights flickered. A low rumble built, not from the engines but from somewhere deeper, as if the station itself was protesting. Myra's heart quickened. She hit the comm. "Captain? We've got a problem." The fluctuations just punched through the outer hull sensors. "It's like the void's reaching in." Alara's response was immediate, calm as steel. "On my way. Kai with me. Lock down non-essentials." The 3 of them converged in the central corridor, the station's emergency lights casting long shadows. Alara led, her stride purposeful. Kai followed, clutching a tablet like a shield. Mira brought up the rear, toolkit slung over her shoulder. "It's accelerating," Kai said as they reached the engineering access. The hollow projection he'd brought showed the unraveling web spreading, tendrils inching toward their sector. "If we don't isolate the station's field integrity, we'll be caught in the next wave." Alara glanced at Mira. "Your call on the fix. Make it quick." Mira grinned faintly, though tension etched her features. "Already thinking." We'll need to vent the auxiliary plasma to create a buffer. Risky, but it'll buy us time. They ducked into the engine room, the air thick with the scent of ozone. Mira dove into the panels, sparks flying as she worked. Kai monitored the data, calling out adjustments. Ilara stood watch, her hand resting on the pistol at her hip. Not that it would help against unraveling reality. The first rail jolt hit like a hammer. The station lurched, klaxons wailing. Alarms blared, hull breach in Sector 4. Ilara's mind raced. Their early plan, simple stabilization, had backfired. The fluctuations had latched onto the power surge, amplifying instead of damping. Seal it off. Ilara barked. Mira slammed a conduit shut, sweat beading on her forehead. Done, but we're bleeding Atmo. And the stars, look. Through the small porthole, the stars twisted unnaturally as if the void was clawing closer. Robe on the last attempt, its signal winking out in a burst of static. 2 crew members gone with it, friends she'd shared meals with, laughs over ration packs. No room for error now. Risky. If the tethers snap. They won't, Mia insisted. I've stress-tested the composites. Humans built these ships to outlast stars, remember? We're not some fragile alien frigate folding at the first wrinkle. Raj shot a glance at Elena, his cautious nature evident in the furrow of his brow. It's untested against this scale. The math suggests a 42% chance of entanglement, drones get pulled in and we follow. The ship lurched, klaxons blaring as a secondary alert lit the board. Alarms wailed, structural integrity at 78%. Elena's mind raced through the variables. The collapsing universe didn't care for probabilities. It devoured everything in its path, stars folding into singularities, nebulae unraveling like pulled threads. They'd come this far on grit and glue, humanity's last arc fleeing the end. Turning back meant dooming the cryobays holding 5,000 souls. Do it, Elena decided, slapping the comm panel. Mia, spool up the drones. Raj, monitor the fluctuations and feed me real-time adjustments. We're not going down without a fight. Mia's laugh echoed through the speakers, equal parts relief and defiance. I kept spinning up now. Hold on to your seats. This is gonna feel like the galaxy's giving us a wedge. As the engineering hum intensified, Elena strapped into the command chair, the harness biting into her shoulders. The view screen showed the drones ejecting in a flurry, silver specks trailing monofilament lines that shimmered against the chaos. For a moment, the Endurance hung suspended, the pull of the maw tugging at its frame. Then the tethers tautened. The ship whipped sideways, engines flaring in compensation. G-forces slammed Elena back, her vision tunneling to the readouts. Raj's voice rose in urgency, adjusting vector, 10 degrees port. Hold it. The maneuver worked barely. The drones stabilized the spin, yanking them free from the immediate shear. But as the stars realigned on the screen, a new warning pulsed. One tether frayed, a drone vanishing into the void. Their margin had shrunk, the fuel burn eating into reserves faster than hoped. Elena exhaled, unstrapping as the ship steadied. We're clear for now. But that cost us. Raj, plot the next leg. Mia, patch what you can. In the quiet that followed, the bridge felt smaller, the weight of what they'd gambled settling in. The universe collapsed fast, but humanity walked out slowly, one desperate step at a time. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console, her knuckles white against the humming metal. The ship's alarms had dulled to a persistent whine, like a distant storm that refused to break. She glanced at Jax, the engineer, who was elbow-deep in a tangle of exposed wiring behind the auxiliary panel. His face, smeared with grease, twisted in concentration. Cautious as ever, double-checking every splice before committing. We've got maybe an hour before the warp core destabilizes fully, Jax muttered, not looking up. His voice carried that steady edge, the one that kept panic at bay. Sensors show the event horizon creeping in from Sector 7. If we don't reroute power to the shields, it'll swallow us whole. Ilara nodded, her brave resolve a mask over the knot in her gut. She'd led crews through asteroid fields and pirate ambushes, but this, watching the fabric of spacetime fray like old cloth, was different. The universe wasn't just hostile, it was unraveling, a cosmic thread pulled loose by some ancient anomaly they'd stumbled upon weeks ago. No empire, no rival fleet, just the void turning inward, hungry and indifferent. Mira, the pilot, paced the bridge, her witty barbs silenced for once. She stopped at the viewport, staring at the stars blurring into streaks of impossible color. Remember that time we jury-rigged the thrusters with coffee filters and duct tape? Worked like a charm against those Krell drones. Her attempt at levity fell flat, but it pulled Ilara's gaze from the readouts. Yeah, Ilara said, forcing a half-smile. But this isn't drones. The anomaly's feedback loop is feeding on our emissions. We tried isolating the core, failed. We tried quantum dampeners, backfired, nearly tore a hole in the hull. She straightened, mind racing through options. Teamwork had gotten them this far, it would have to again. Jax yanked the cable free, sparks dancing like fireflies. Got it? Auxiliary power rerouted. Shields at 60%, but it's brittle. One surge and we're ghosts. He wiped his brow, eyes meeting Ilara's. Caution one out, he hesitated. Captain, the math doesn't lie. We push the engines now, we might punch through to stable space. Or we overload and accelerate the collapse around us. Mira spun on her heel, fingers drumming the armrest. Or we adapt. Humans don't fold, we bend the rules. What if we use the anomaly's own pull? Slingshot effect, but inverted. Ride the edge, let it propel us out instead of in. Ilara considered it, the idea sparking like Jax's wires. Risky, yes. Real cost if it went wrong. The ship could shear apart, stranding them in the void. But staying meant certain end. Run the sims, she ordered, voice firm. Jax, calibrate the field generators. Mira, plot the trajectory. We do this together or not at all. The bridge thrummed with renewed purpose. Jax dove back in, tools clattering. Mira slid into her seat, holograms flickering to life under her hands, curves and vectors weaving a desperate path. Ilara watched the viewport where the blackness deepened, stars winking out one by one. The collapse whispered against the hull, a low groan that vibrated through her boots. Minutes stretched, tension coiling like a spring. Jax's sims beeped approval, his cautious nod the first crack of hope. It's holding, barely. 87% viability. But the strain, it'll cost us the secondary drive. No more jumps after this. Mira grinned, sharp and defiant. One shot's all we need. Engaging in 3, 2. Ilara braced, heart pounding. The ship lurched as the engines roared, the anomaly's pull yanking them toward the maw. Alarms blared anew, red lights painting their faces. The deck tilted, gravity flickering, and for a heartbeat, Ilara tasted the void, cold, eternal. Then, a shuddering snap. The ship surged forward, the collapse's edge whipping past like a tidal wave. Stars stabilized, the anomaly shrinking in the rear sensors, a fading scar on the cosmos. They'd made it. But the secondary drive's loss lingered, a tangible weight. No quick escapes now, their path home stretched long and uncharted. Ilara exhaled, clapping Jax on the shoulder. Good work. All of us. Mira leaned back, wit returning. Next time, let's find an anomaly that collapses slower. Or better, one with a bar. Laughter echoed, brittle but real, as the ship limped onward into the reformed stars. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the control room, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the bulkheads. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white, as the ship's alarms wailed in staccato bursts. The rift's pull had intensified, a gravitational maw yanking at the hull with invisible fingers, and their jury-rigged stabilizers were buckling. Hold her steady, Jax, she said, her voice cutting through the din like a knife. Jax, sweat beading on his forehead, wrestled with the manual overrides, his cautious nature showing in the deliberate twist of his hands on the levers. He wasn't one for bold risks, but here hesitation meant death. Mira paced behind them, her witty retorts silenced for once by the gravity of the moment. She'd been the one to spot the anomaly first, a tear in spacetime not from any weapon but from the universe itself unraveling at the edges, a cosmic fray born of the war's fallout. The Krell fleet was gone, scattered by their earlier gambit, but victory tasted like ash when the stars themselves turned traitor. If we divert power from the core again, we'll lose life support, Mira muttered, more to herself than anyone, her fingers tracing the schematics on the cracked display. The resource shortage hit hard now, fuel cells depleted, air recyclers straining, and the rift feeding on their momentum like a starving beast. Jax glanced up, his eyes meeting Elena's. Brave as she was, even she couldn't mask the flicker of doubt. Their plan to seal the rift with a feedback loop from the engines had backfired spectacularly. The pulse had widened it instead, pulling debris and plasma into a swirling vortex just beyond the viewport. A chunk of asteroid tumbled past, close enough to rattle the deck plating. "We can't punch through," he said flatly, the words heavy. "Not without ripping ourselves apart." Elena nodded, forcing her mind to the adaptations they'd earned through grit. Human ingenuity, she'd always said, wasn't about superior tech, it was about refusing to break. She leaned over the console, pulling up the auxiliary schematics. The lingering consequence of their last skirmish hung in the air, the Krell probe they'd captured, its alien core humming faintly in the hold. Mira caught her drift immediately. "You're thinking of overcharging it? Use their own echo against the rift." Elena's lips quirked in a grim smile. "Clever enough. But it'll fry the interfaces. We lose the probe and any chance of decoding their NAV data." Jax exhaled sharply. "Better than losing the ship. Or us." They moved as one, the camaraderie forged in fire propelling them. Mira dashed to the engineering bay, her steps quick and sure, barking orders into the comms for the minimal crew below. Jax sealed the overrides, buying them precious seconds as the ship groaned under the strain. Elena routed the power, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. The rift loomed larger now, a yawning void speckled with fractured light, promising oblivion. But as the probe's core linked in, its ethereal whine rising to match the alarms, a spark of hope ignited. The feedback began, not a roar but a precise harmonic, threading into the tear like a needle through fabric. The ship shuddered violently, hull plates screeching, but the pull eased. Myra's voice crackled over the intercom. "It's holding, barely. Get us clear." Elena punched the thrusters, the engines flaring in defiance. They broke free, the rift snapping shut behind them with a silent thunder, leaving a scar in the stars. But the cost lingered. The probe was slagged, their air thinning faster now, and the NAV data with it. Jax slumped back, wiping his brow. "We made it. But where to next?" Elena stared at the viewport, the universe's collapse a whisper away. "Anywhere but here. Together." Ilara gripped the console, her knuckles white against the flickering holograph. The ship's alarms had dulled to a persistent whine, like a distant storm refusing to break. Around her, the engineering bay hummed with the strain of jury-rigged repairs, wires snaking across the floor like exposed veins, sparks occasionally dancing from overloaded panels. Jax hunched over the quantum stabilizer, his broad shoulders tense, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "It's holding barely," he muttered, not looking up. "But if we push the drive any harder, we'll tear a hole straight through to whatever's left of reality." She nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. The collapse had accelerated in the last cycle. Stars weren't just winking out anymore, they were unraveling, threads of light fraying into nothingness. Their plan to punch through to the fringe dimensions felt like grasping at smoke. Mira, ever the sharp-eyed navigator, paced behind them, her fingers tapping a rhythm against her thigh. Scans show the anomaly shifting. "It's not random, it's following us. Like it's hungry." Her voice carried that cautious edge, the one that had kept them alive through a dozen close calls. Jax snorted, wiping grime from his hands onto his jumpsuit. "Hungry universe. Great. Next you'll say it's got teeth." But his wit fell flat. No one laughed. The cost was already mounting, fuel reserves at critical, the crew's rotations blurring into exhaustion. Ilara remembered the faces they'd left behind on the outpost, the ones who hadn't made the evac shuttle. Real people, real stakes, not some abstract cosmic joke. "Options?" Ilara asked, forcing steadiness into her tone. She traced the display's edge where the collapse's wavefront loomed, a jagged scar across the starfield. Mira stopped pacing, leaning over the NAV console. "We could vent the auxiliary tanks by time to recalibrate. Risky, might destabilize the core." Her eyes met Ilara's, brave but unflinching, the weight of decision shared without words. Jack straightened, his cautious nature winning out. Or we double down on the shield weave. I've got a patch that might reinforce it using the excess plasma. But it'll burn out the emitters. No turning back after that. The ship shuddered then, a deep groan echoing through the hull as another ripple hit. Lights dimmed, consoles flickering like candles in wind. Ilara's heart pounded, the air thick with the scent of ozone and fear. They weren't heroes in some epic tale, just three humans, stubborn and clever, piecing together survival from scraps. Do both, she said finally, voice cutting through the tension. Jack, start the weave. Mira, prep the vents. We adapt or we end. As they moved, synchronized in the chaos, Ilara watched the wavefront creep closer on the screen. It wasn't just a hazard, it was a mirror reflecting their fragility. But in that moment, with hands steady and plans interlocking, she felt the grit of it, the unyielding push that had carried humanity this far. The universe might collapse fast, but they wouldn't go quietly. Not yet. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold alloy. The stars beyond the viewport weren't stars anymore, just fractured shards of light bending in impossible ways, like glass under too much pressure. The universe was unraveling thread by thread, and her team was one of the last threads holding it together. Or so the Alliance hoped. Status, Mira? Ilara's voice cut through the hum of the failing life support systems. She didn't turn, eyes fixed on the anomaly, a swirling maw of darkness that had swallowed 3 sectors in the last cycle. Mira, the wiry engineer with grease-streaked cheeks and a perpetual squint, tapped furiously at her console. Shields at 23%, Captain. The gravitic stabilizers are shot. Another pulse like that and we'll be paced. Her fingers danced over the keys, rerouting power from non-essentials. Lights flickered in response, casting long shadows across the deck. Jax leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, his broad frame a steady anchor in the chaos. The pilot's easy grin was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped focus. He'd flown through worse, pirate blockades, wormhole collapses, but this was the end of everything. We can't outrun it, El. Not with the engines limping like this. We need that bypass protocol from the archives. Ilara nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. The archives were buried in the core of the ship, behind layers of corrupted data streams. The first attempt had fried 2 drones and nearly cost them the auxiliary bridge. But Jax was right. Humanity's old ingenuity was their only shot. Mira prepped the crawler. Jax, you're with me. We go in hot, grab what we can, and get out before the next wave hits. The deck shuddered as another ripple tore through the fabric of space. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing like a dying heartbeat. Mira slammed a panel shut. Crawler's nominal, but if that thing pulses again. She trailed off, strapping into her harness. Ilara pushed off the railing, her boots magnetic clinging to the floor. Resolve hardened her features, the cautious planner giving way to the brave leader. Then we make it quick. For the colonies. For everyone still out there. They moved as a unit, corridors twisting under the strain of the collapsing reality. Bulkheads groaned, sparks flying from exposed wires. Jax took point, his scanner sweeping for structural weaknesses. Left at the junction, looked stable for now. The core access was a nightmare. A vertical shaft plunged into darkness, emergency ladders slick with condensation. Ilara clipped her line first, descending with controlled breaths. The air grew thick, laced with ozone and the faint tang of melting circuits. Halfway down, the ship lurched, throwing Jax against the wall. He grunted, steadying himself. Told you it was bad. Keep moving, Ilara snapped, though her heart hammered. Below, the archive chamber loomed, its doors ajar like a forgotten tomb. Data crystals gleamed faintly inside, survivors of the initial purge. Myra's voice crackled over comms from above. Pulse incoming in 90 seconds. You have to hurry. They dropped the last meters, boots hitting deck with a thud. Jax jacked into the nearest terminal, his face illuminated by the holographic readouts. Lines of code scrolled, human code, resilient and adaptive, written in the frantic days before the collapse accelerated. Got it? Bypass protocol. Reroutes the inertial dampeners through the auxiliary fusion core. Risky, but it could buy us time to jump. Ilara scanned the chamber, her light catching on a cluster of crystals pulsing erratically. One held the key, a simulation model for stabilizing microsingularities. She snatched it, slotting it into her pack. Download complete? Almost. Wait, interference. Jax's hands blurred, countering the digital assault from the anomaly's bleed. The shaft above rattled, debris cascading down. Myra's warning screamed through, "Pulse now. Evacuate." Ilara hauled Jax up, the ladder vibrating under their weight. The ship howled as the wave hit, reality folding in on itself. Lights died, plunging them into strobe-lit panic. They climbed, muscles burning, the void nipping at their heels. Bursting onto the upper deck, they sealed the hatch just as the core buckled behind them. Mira was there, dragging them toward the bridge. "Did you get it?" Jax nodded, breathless. "Yeah. But the cost? The core's compromised. One jump max." Ilara met their eyes, the weight settling. They'd saved the ship, maybe the evacuation fleet, but the universe's collapse had claimed another piece of their world. The stars outside warped further, a reminder that triumph was fleeting. Then we make that jump count. The dim hum of the evacuation core filled the chamber like a distant heartbeat, each pulse a reminder that time was bleeding away. Lena gripped the console's edge, her knuckles white against the worn alloy, as the readouts flickered with warnings. The collapse had accelerated, faster than the models predicted, tendrils of warped spacetime snaking through the outer hulls of the Ark. "We're losing structural integrity in sectors 7 through 12, she muttered, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. Beside her, Kale, the wiry Thalian engineer with his iridescent scales dulled by exhaustion, punched in overrides, his claws clicking furiously. "The seals won't hold another hour. We need to vent the auxiliary bays." Captain Reyes stood at the viewport, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow over the holographic display. He was the rock of the crew, his calm a deliberate choice after years of frontier command, but even now his jaw tightened as he watched the stars smear into streaks of unraveling light. The universe was folding in on itself, a cosmic implosion that had caught the galaxy off guard. Aliens from a dozen worlds had begged for passage on the human arcs, their empires crumbling in panic, but humanity's exodus was methodical, unglamorous. One slow walk at a time through the dimensional gates they'd clawed into existence. No grand fleets, just grit and ingenuity against the void. "Options?" Reyes asked, turning from the chaos outside. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, met Lena's. She straightened, pushing back the ache in her arms from hours of rerouting power. "We can jettison the non-essentials, fuel cells, hydroponics frames, but that'll cut our range by 30%. Or we adapt the gate protocol. Overload it to pull more through at once, but it risks feedback frying the core." Kale hissed, a Thalian sound of frustration mixed with admiration. "Humans and your jury rigs. Last cycle my people would have prayed to the voids. You break them open." He adjusted a dial, the holographic grid shifting to show the gate's pulsing energy web. The challenge wasn't just the collapse. It was the refugees clogging the queues, families from shattered worlds, their tech incompatible, their desperation a powder keg. Earlier plans had backfired when a surge from alien power sources destabilized the field, stranding a group mid-transit. Ghosts in the ether, lost to the crunch. Reyes nodded, weighing it. "Adapt the protocol. Lena, you're on point. Kale, sync the alien inputs, make it seamless." Tension coiled in the air, thick as the ozone from sparking panels. Alarms blared softly, a chorus of red lights painting their faces in crimson. Lena dove into the code, her fingers flying, rewriting lines on the fly. It was human magic, not spells but sweat-soaked logic turning catastrophe into a narrow path. The first test pulse rippled through the gate, a shimmering tear in reality that widened just enough to swallow a cluster of waiting shuttles whole. But the backlash hit like a hammer. The core groaned, vibrations rattling the deck plates, and a section of the hull buckled with a screech of tearing metal. Debris spun into the viewport's view, fragments of a dying cosmos. "It's holding barely," Lena shouted over the din, her heart pounding. Kale braced against the console, rerouting emergency power, while Reyes barked orders into the comms. "All hands secure for search. We're punching through." In that moment, camaraderie wasn't a word. It was action, the three of them a single unit against the unraveling. As the gate stabilized, pulling through the last waves of evacuees, the cost settled in. Scans showed microfractures in the Ark's frame, a lingering scar that would hobble them in the pocket realm ahead. Reyes placed a hand on Lena's shoulder, brief but firm. You bought us time. Now we live with the dents. Outside, the universe screamed its final contraction, but inside, the slow walk continued. One step, one adaptation into the unknown. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines filled the cramped bridge, a steady vibration that seeped into Alara's bones like an old ache. She gripped the console edge, her knuckles white against the cold metal, as the view screen flickered with the last feeds from the outer arrays. Stars, once pinpricks of defiant light, now smeared into elongated streaks, the fabric of space folding in on itself like wet paper. The collapse had accelerated, devouring sectors and hours what should have taken eons. Humanity's arc, the Odyssey, was the final thread, trailing behind the fleet that had scattered like seeds into the void. Status on the warp stabilizers? Captain Reyes asked, his voice gravelly but steady, eyes fixed on the holographic display where red warnings pulsed like wounds. Jackson, the engineer, wiped sweat from his brow with a grease-streaked forearm. He was the wiry one, always cracking wise under fire, but now his fingers flew over the panels with grim focus. Holding at 60% cap. But the feedback loop's building. One more surge and it'll fry the coils. We're blind if that happens. Alara nodded, her cautious nature urging her to double-check every reading. She'd been the navigator, plotting paths through the unraveling cosmos, her maps now little more than educated guesses etched in fading light. The rift ahead, it's our only shot. If we thread it right, we punch into the stable zone the probe's marked. But the margins are razor-thin. Reyes leaned back, the lines on his face deeper in the emergency glow. Brave to a fault, he'd led them from the inner worlds when the first tremors hit, rallying survivors with promises he barely believed. Then we thread it. Jax, reroute power from life support if you have to. Alara, plot the vector. No room for error. The ship groaned as another wave rippled through the hull, the collapse's edge nipping at their heels. Alarms blared, sharp and insistent, cutting through the tension like shattered glass. Jackson cursed under his breath, slamming a fist on the override. Power's spiking, stabilizers at 40. We lose them now, we're space dust. Alara's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the course, her mind racing through trajectories. The rift loomed on the screen, a jagged tear in reality, swirling with colors that defied naming, emerald fractures laced with violet fury. It was beautiful in a way that chilled her. Vector locked. Engaging in 10. Reyes stood, placing a hand on each of their shoulders, a rare gesture that spoke of the camaraderie forged in these dying days. We've come this far on grit and guts. Humanity didn't build empires by folding early. Let's walk out slow like we own the stars. The countdown ticked down, each second stretching into eternity. Jackson's tools clattered as he jury-rigged a bypass, sparks flying in brief, angry bursts. 3. Alara held her breath, watching the rift swell, its pull tugging at the ship like invisible fingers. 1. The Odyssey surged forward, engines roaring in protest. The view screen warped, colors bleeding into a kaleidoscope storm. Alarms screamed as the stabilizers buckled, the hull shuddering violently. Jackson yelled something lost in the din, yanking levers with desperate strength. Alara braced, her world narrowing to the console's glow. Then, silence. Not the grave quiet of death, but a profound hush as if the universe itself had exhaled. The view screen cleared. Stars, stable, unyielding, spread before them, a new expanse untouched by the collapse. The rift sealed behind with a final, thunderous snap, severing them from the chaos. Reyes exhaled, slumping into his chair. We made it. Jackson grinned, though exhaustion etched his features. Barely. Stabilizers are toast, repairs'll take weeks. But hell, we're breathing. Alara scanned the readings, a cautious smile breaking through. The stable zone was real, habitable worlds, resources enough for the remnants of their kind. But the cost lingered, the fleet signals faint, many lost to the void, their own ship limping, a testament to human stubbornness. As the Odyssey drifted into the new dawn, Reyes plotted their first survey. They'd rebuild, adapt, turn survival into something enduring. The universe had collapsed fast, but humanity walked out slow, carrying the spark of what was into what could be.